Rashna, welcome to News Laundry. Rashna Imhasly is the author of Psychology of Love, life-changing book for many people, and now is in the process of completing, or you have completed your second book, which is going to be published by Yatra Books, Namita Gokhale. Always intriguing stuff. I've read a few excerpts which you were kind enough to forward to me. But before we get into your book, I would like you to explain to our viewers what is the difference between a psychotherapist and what is a psychiatrist. First of all, most Indians are extremely wary of going to either one. There is a huge stigma of going to a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist. It implies that there's something wrong with you. So first let's start with the difference between the two.
Well, that's the problem in India because psychiatry is associated with pagalpan, and you have to be sort of cuckoo to go to a psychiatrist. Now, psychiatry has got absolutely nothing to do with psychology because it's more the secondary functions that start to malfunction in the body. You have to be a medical doctor and study psychiatry, and it's medicated. Now, in psychology, we study psychosocial problems, family problems, problems of caste, and where the ego is suppressed and cannot blossom and come out in its full potential. And therefore, they're sort of growing up problems as a child grows up. So they're more psychosocial problems. And it's more to do with sorting out yourself. This role in India was very much taken up by the gurus and the kind of spiritual guides. People, when they had these kind of problems, used to go to gurus. So when psychology came to India, it got associated with psychiatry, and we got a bad name.
Because of all the medications.
That's right.
And sort of doping people out. Whereas in fact, psychotherapy, what you do, is the opposite. It's in fact unpeeling a person's personality.
It's about the psyche, it's about the soul. Each one of us has a seed within us, which has its potential, which is the self. And each one can become this wonderful tree from that seed it is, if it gets the right soil, the right fertilizer, the right water, and the right light, which is part of growing up, and all of us don't have perfect parents or perfect circumstances where we grow up, and we grow up like an injured tree, and therefore to sort that out is part of what counseling is about.
You've written about collective consciousness and
the collective unconscious,
and also this learned helplessness. Now, this is something that I would presume that you see a lot in your practice, where you see women coming in with an acceptance of the fact that they cannot do anything. Am I right?
We look upon it like if you see a raccoon, that little playful animal, and if it's given electric shocks and it's in a cage, it slowly stops to withdraw because that shock is just too much for it, and it curls up in a corner and learns a survival mode. And that's what we call learned helplessness. It doesn't know another way to survive, so the only way to survive is that way. Now, even if you leave the cage door open thereafter, it will not escape. It just remains there because that's what it thinks life is about. Now, very often I find this learned helplessness syndrome in women. They've learned just to accept things, that this is our lot and we don't have a choice, so might as well get on with it. But then it's not their full potential. That's not who they are. So,
say one case history that you spoke to me about this woman who was raped by her father-in-law, and
it's very common, by the way.
Yes, it is common, and
we hear about it all the time, and we have to keep our mouth shut because we have to have the secrecy of a doctor.
You were called in by the hospital because this young woman wanted to have an abortion because she knew her child was from her father-in-law and did not want to have that child. And
she tried to abort it because she knew it wasn't the child of her husband, And so she tried to escape an ugly situation by just going ahead and having an abortion.
Because her husband was sexually sort of dysfunctional.
Yeah. So at the hospital, you have to have the signature of the husband. So she felt trapped because if she had told her husband, the husband would have wanted to have the child. And if she had disclosed that it was not his, then she identified herself caught in the same syndrome as Sita. She kept talking about, look what happened to Sita. Sita couldn't go home to her parents. Sita can't go back to her marital home because she'll be blamed for what has happened.
So how did you resolve it?
Well, first of all, she didn't even know about counseling, and so she wouldn't talk. So it took a long time of trust to bring her out, to say that there are choices and, you can get out of this one and so on. And they don't see a solution. The best solution they see is to slit their hand when they don't have a choice. I tried to get the story out and finally found out that it was not her husband's child and felt ashamed to have her father-in-law's child. Imagine having to look at your baby and know that it's the half-brother of your husband. So I said, yes, I think you must have this abortion. I think it's very important, and I will support you, first of all, to let you know that if I tell the hospital, because they have referred you to me, you can even have this abortion without going through by telling your husband or the father-in-law. So that relieved her already. But I said that, look, you can't go back to such a dysfunctional family. You don't have to survive there, nor do you have to go back to your parents. You have to learn to survive in your environment, but change that environment. You must, because we are the new generation and we can change this. So she says, but I don't see a way. So I said, well, don't you think your husband will come for therapy? And she says, I can try. And he did. And he was really a good chap, I must say. He'd been to a university in America. He was, a hip young man. And so, of course, you have to break this slowly to them. So you first ask, what would you do if you found out that it was not your child? And then, that first shock, and then let them absorb that. What would you do if you found out if your wife was raped? And then he sort of felt concerned and wanted to protect her. And then I said, but what would you do if you found out if it was your father? And then he broke down and also didn't see a solution, meaning to say he felt really broken and betrayed. And then I tried to explain to him that it's not the end of the world and that these things happen and that he should not confront his father in a way where he thinks he can change society from one day to another, because this has to change slowly. These traditions, these families, they think it's the most normal thing ke ghar ka mamla hai, and they have a right to their daughters-in-law and stuff like that. It's built into their psychic system, and until we don't change these systems of the collective behavior pattern of people, that it's not okay, that their conscience starts to hurt them and that they start to realize it. And so until that collective unconscious doesn't change, we can't take on society as such. So I said, you have to protect your Sita, you have to see to it that your father-in-law doesn't live with you so that she doesn't get into these uncomfortable situations. And he did take it on very seriously. They did have the abortion. They have their own child. They have 2 children now. Mm-hmm. I think that was a good outcome.
Good story, yeah. Mm. But I think it was also because you gave him a lot of freedom in not having to confront the father. Because another therapist could have told him that to resolve the situation, you must confront your father, which would be really a difficult...
It's detrimental.
It is a very destructive thing.
You know that family is already dysfunctional. So you have to try to make it functional by slowly bringing in changes. You can't take them on head on.
Now you mentioned that this woman spoke about Sita, and you've also written about Sita. at length. The stereotypical image of concept of Sita is that she's the sacrificing wife who follows her husband into the jungle, gives up the comforts of the palace, and then is abducted by Ravan. And because Ram listened to his praja, his dhobi, who said that she's not clean, he sent her off. Now,
even though she had gone through the sacrificial fire and come out clean.
Now, can you talk about your interpretation of how she internalized her integrity, her dignity, and went through this? You have written about it.
I think, you know, Sita is actually a heroine of the story, not Ram, for me. Because I think at every stage, if you look at Sita's story, when she was married, she had to go into exile from her marital home. She could have stayed on in the palace, but she chose to go and be by Ram's side because she thought that's her wifely duty. Then she gets abducted. Again, in Ravana's grove, she doesn't allow him to be undignified with her. In fact, she educates Ravana that you can't treat a woman like that. And in fact, she reforms. I look at it psychologically as, you know, the killing of the demon side of Ravana, who just thinks he can have a woman. He can't. And therefore, he admires that woman. He respects her. She reforms him, according to me, because she's not ravaged by him. When she comes back and then finally becomes pregnant and comes back to Ayodhya, and by the way, Ayodhya means a place without war. People rejoice because they have their king and queen back. When in mythology, when you say a king and a queen are united, it means the male and the female part, the yoga has come together. And all people can rejoice because if a king is functional, then his praja is functional. But instead, again, this dhobi story happens, and again she has to do the fire test, and although she comes out pure, she's again abandoned, and she has to go off into another exile. So her life is constantly about sacrifice and exile. She brings up the children as an only mother.
But it's easy to see her as a victim, but you don't see her as a victim.
I don't see her as a victim. What choice did she have? But she does it with so much dignity. She never belittles him.
But you're saying what choice does she have
when you say
that women always have a choice?
Yeah, 1 minute. But you see, when the collective unconscious is that way, like in this family, I said, you can't change it all of a sudden. She realized she can't take on that culture. So she does what is most decent. So she brings up these children, and then the children take the father on, and then he realizes that he has done wrong and wants to rectify it. Again, she has to go to, and then she says, thank you very much. I can't keep doing this because I know, again, you know, her experience of her past has told her that because she knows she has no chance, so it's better to lie low. I don't want to do this. And, you know, she goes under again because the collective unconscious is not ready to have a woman like her. I think she is a heroine because she's so dignified throughout, and she's never ever brings out an angry or a raging word or puts anyone down. And I think that's feminine consciousness. And I think that feminine consciousness is so different from the feminist view where you have that angry, raging
battle gear on, where you want to take on
the male energy
into
and
yourself.
You treat males like male. She's showing it in a okay, it's not my time, but I don't have to be contaminated by this kind of behavior. I'll keep my dignity. And I think so many women who have come as my clients have taken this dignified route where they've brought up their children, you know, they've had dysfunctional families, they have looked after their kids, they've brought them up, and they've had, you know, they don't look back. They just look forward and get on with their life without raging or being victims or so.
So what if Sita, in fact, tried to transform Ram instead of accepting that and told him that you are part of a collective consciousness which is not acceptable in the wholeness of a family or a kingdom?
You know, Madhu, I think the time has come where this kind of a Sita, it's time for this new era of a Ram and Sita. The time is here because we are not going to take this anymore. There is a huge waking up in the society which has happened after this rape case, and no woman is going to accept it. And so if enough of these kind of Sitas do rise up, the collective unconscious has to change. When enough people are going to say, we're not going to take this anymore, and that the Rams in their life have to transform, and it is the woman who has to do it in this way, where she is able to explain to the man, not in this angry, raging voice, but to show that the man is stuck in a dysfunctional pattern. They're all mama's boys, many of them.
And it makes them as miserable?
Yeah, because their feminine function within them, each one has a male and a female function in themselves, and their feminine function is not developed enough. And if the feminine is not allowed to develop in herself, then how can she transform a male? So if the feminine can be strong enough, like a Draupadi, who is able to stand in her right, that's why I feel that we have so many functional goddesses, and that's what I want to bring out in the book, that we don't have to take the example from Sita, we can take it from so many functional archetypes that we have. Draupadi is a figure who is able to speak her truth in the worst, miserable, dysfunctional family where she's being derobed in front of the
and
whole
she connects
praja.
with the divine.
She connects with the divine and is able to talk from her strength in herself. She doesn't need the strength outside at all, because she's so connected in herself. And that's what each one of us have. And if we can wake up that part within ourselves, we don't need the others to look after us.
What you've said is, you've written that the woman symbolizes birth, growth, commitment, duty, loyalty, affection, spiritual maturity. All the human qualities that need to be developed by both men and women. Now, the biggest task facing us today, as you spoke about, the beginning of the transformation, just the seeds growing after this December rape last year, when many people were coming up with rather horrendous statements, is how do we develop these qualities that you've mentioned in men? Because you've also written that it's the mother who teaches the sons to respect and honor womanhood as she realizes that they are the new male voices that can protect and respect women, the changing voice of the collective consciousness of our age, which can bring to an end patriarchal domination. But the voices that came out often after the rape were just the opposite. They were, in fact, the patriarchs blaming the woman. In fact, women also. Many women spoke up and said that it's her fault. Why was she out after 10 o'clock at night?
That's again part of the old consciousness that they keep spewing because they know no better. All they have learned so far is, their whole psyche is seeped in patriarchy. What better can they spew except that old stuff? But if we as women can empower men to bring out these finer qualities of Mother Earth, the nurturing, the caring, the feeling function. If we transform that in ourselves, then only the male can see that finer quality in him can transform. But if you have this raging female again, he'll just turn off and say, what am I going to do with this woman again? It brings out the worst in him. But the woman can transform.
Which is what has happened, in fact, in the West, where we had the first wave of feminists during the suffragettes, where of course, India didn't have to go through that because women could vote as soon as we got our independence. Then the second wave with Betty Friedan and Gloria Steinem. Then there was the backlash.
Exactly.
So there is all three waves happened, and that kind of went past India because, one, we didn't need the first wave. In the second wave, we were moving very quickly into top jobs in America up till the second point, as many people have written about.
Seconds.
The seconds, yes. And even today, when you see women who are heading banks, shipping industries, media houses, all this is happening. They still go home and play the role of the good housewife. There is no sharing of domestic responsibility, parenting responsibilities, taking care of the old parents' responsibilities. Everything is then you're back to being the old feminine wife and being proud of it. And I see that in the coming generation, I see my children, for example, these new couples, there is a sharing of parenting, there's a sharing of domestic responsibilities.
New role models are there.
Yes, but today, women of my generation and your generation are still stuck.
Absolutely.
In being that
the old paradigm.
Yes, and feeling proud that, oh, we run a good home, I do all the parenting, and my husband knows nothing about what's happening with the kids. They're actually proud of that. That is so detrimental.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you crack that?
The young generation are doing it. We don't have to do it. I think our case is, passé. And the young generation are not going to take on that. They are going to ask for equality in the sharing of bringing up kids, of the duties at home and the workplace. Because it's completely a new generation, and let's face it, I mean, what is it? 50% of our population is now under 25. Mm-hmm. They are the new voice.
Yeah. Well, you've written, caught between tradition and change, we are in the middle of a tumultuous transformation, and yet we do not know what shape to give it, for we ourselves do not feel secure on the new ground.
Yeah, and I do feel that there is a shift that happened after the Delhi rape case, because I do feel that even the males, there were a lot of males out there too, and I was very happy to see that they too were not accepting this kind of behavior. And I think that the name was kept anonymous. Everybody identified it as a symbol of change for themselves, because many of the people could identify their own cases where they were mishandled in their youth and so on, and they'd kept it quiet, and it's now all coming out into the open, and we're not going to accept this anymore. So I do feel that there is a huge change happening. It is a new era, and I have a lot of hope.
There is also young men that I've seen. A lot of young men are threatened by this new young woman who sometimes brings in a bigger paycheck in the family, sometimes bigger than the father's. The father who used to stop a young girl from going out at 7 o'clock at night can't say a word because she's going to work at 7 o'clock to call center and working all night. And because she's bringing the biggest paycheck, he can't say much. So there's a lot of turmoil within the families where the patriarchs are now feeling lost. So what you're, I think, pointing to is that there needs to be a healing process for the men also, that a support system for the men, that it's okay to let go of this control. And it's good.
Absolutely. And also that mothers, we as mothers, too have to support our daughters in a way that we have not done so far, and just have this beta culture, that I have to have this male in order to feel secure in myself. That is over, I hope, in the new generation too, so that we have this equality coming up.
Yeah, but Rashna, what one sees around, what exists around us, even educated women will fast on Mondays for a son. They will treat their son differently. The girls in the house do not have a langar when it's his birthday, but on the boy's birthday there's a big langar and poor people are given food. And the sisters are also taught to participate in this inequality.
And women
they accept it.
And women go and abort the female fetus.
Yes. So
the change will come. It's coming slowly. I do feel that the change is here, and I'm sure that the new generation, maybe not as fast as we like, because the collective unconscious takes a long time to transform, but it is transforming.
You mentioned two other cases that came to you. One was about a woman who was subjected to marital rape, and she was the one who was bringing in the paycheck while her husband did nothing but party and socialize and get drunk. Now you see a woman who's stuck in that consciousness, when to an outsider it would be so obvious that why do you need a man like that? But there are so many of us who are stuck in that role where you feel you cannot let go.
You see, this whole thing about Jodi, and socially the collective unconscious only honors a woman when she is still married. The marital status of the Jodi is so strong, whether you look at it in our movies or wherever. To be married And to put up with this kind of dysfunction is better than being a single woman, because as a single woman, you get no respect.
Oh, you're treated so badly.
Exactly.
So bad. I lived as a single woman when we first moved back from New York for a year and a half. And you know, people, including in my own family, people would treat me differently the day after Naresh left. It was so stark.
So this is the reason they put up with this kind of nonsense. They rather put up with this than take on the battle alone. So a lot of nonsense is put up with. Although this woman had said no to being sexually abused because her husband used to come home drunk. And he used to spend her money, she used to bring in the paychecks, and still she didn't divorce him. Also because we have kids. What will happen to the kids? What will happen to their marriage? All those fears of the collective unconscious that is there underlying these fears of being a single woman, she puts up and sacrifices. To what extent? Just so that her kids can have a better life. She would have left a long time ago, but a lot of the sacrifice goes because of this feeling of the Mother Earth, you know, I have to nurture that child till they're out.
But then the children grow up seeing
a dysfunctional family.
Marriage and their own. I know one friend of mine who was being abused in her marriage. When her mother asked her, why didn't you tell us? She said, I thought it was normal. Because she had seen her mother being beaten by her father. So she thought it was normal. So it's not acceptable to stay in a marriage if there is...
We call these family complexes. They just go down from one generation to the other. And it's normalizing the abnormal, as we call it. But the fact is, it's much healthier for kids to grow up in a functional home with a single parent rather than a dysfunctional parent and pick up the old traits of dysfunction. It's much healthier. And that's what therapy is also about, to give, you know, choices to women that they have a future. There are so many possibilities when they leave a dysfunctional marriage. Maybe they get another chance.
You also spoke about a woman who came to you who had been raped by a politician. And you, as you told the story, you said that when he called her over at 10 o'clock at night, she felt a little concerned or alarmed.
She first got a phone call. She knew she shouldn't go. Then he talked her into it. No, it's only for, music channel and stuff like that. She found it very odd to go at 10 o'clock, but then she took her friend because her husband wasn't there. Otherwise, she was going to take her husband along. She was stopped at the gate by the security again. Again, she thought, I shouldn't go in without my friend. The security said, no, only you are allowed to go in. And her friend had to go back because they were neighbors. And then he raped her. The police wouldn't register the case either because the police was so scared of the politician. And they asked what they should do. Now, in these kind of situations, of course, she should take it on. But if you know how powerful the politicians are and you know how hopeless it's going to be, even if the police is not going to register her case, you have to take the responsibility back. I said, can you take on this man, who we all know how powerful he is? Can you take him on? And what's going to happen to your kids? What's going to happen to you? What's going to happen to your family? Think about it. And they both discussed it, husband and wife. Her husband was very, very supportive. And they decided not to take it on. So I said, if you drop it, you're not going to be a victim because you made the mistake. You know, sometimes when you're crossing the road and the car comes and you think, I shouldn't go, and you still go and you get a bang and you fall and you've had an accident, it's your own fault because you preempted, you think you could cross and you didn't. Now, she had two warnings. The first was her phone call where her inner voice told her, don't go. The second, when that woman stopped her, was stopped at the gate. Again, she knew that she shouldn't go, yet she went. I said, now blame yourself that you didn't listen to your inner voice and write it off. Don't hold
this. But Rashna,
this.
Isn't that going back to blaming the person to whom it happens? Like, you could say why did the woman again on the bus, the young girl who got raped, she was a little apprehensive in getting onto the bus, and maybe her inner voice said, maybe I shouldn't get onto the bus, but she does. So then again you blame the girl that why didn't you listen to your inner voice? Why did you get onto the bus? I think we have to withdraw this blame on the person to whom it happens.
Not blame, but I'm saying that if they come for therapy, you know the collective unconscious, you know this kind of the whole behavior of especially the political arena and the power that they wield. She had no chance in hell. Okay? Now knowing that the police is also not going to take it on, do you think that she would stand a chance? Now if they decided as a couple, I said, if you're going in for it, I will support you fully. We'll go to a women's organization, take it on and so on. But then you have to take it on for all women. You know, you become the kind of trigger. Do you want to do this? And they decided against it because of the kids. The kids were too young to take on such a thing. So if you drop it, then you're left with, in psychology you say you have a lot of resentment, anger, rage. They're archetypes that brew within you. Which
there's helplessness.
Yeah, and rage. Basically rage, because you're violated against your senses. So basically, how do you deal with that? You really then have to then step backwards and say, I've learned from this example that I will listen to this voice in future. And I have to drop the past, because if I carry it with me, it's like a coal that I'm carrying in my throat. I can neither spit it out nor can I swallow it, and it's detrimental to your future. So we do try to deal with letting go of these kind of things when you can't take on a system.
So we have to accept that we are stuck in a certain form of helplessness when somebody very powerful does this to us.
I think time has changed since. This is an older story. This story is at least 10 years old.
But have they changed? Because there have been accusations against politicians who have and
I know they get away with it.
They've gotten away with it.
They're getting away all over. If you look at the IMF chief,
exactly.
all of them are getting away with it. But the woman's voice is becoming stronger and stronger. But we have to be collectively together, we as women, and not do it in the feminist ranting way. I think Sita is a great example, because when she realizes she can't take on a system, she doesn't get polluted, nor does she get angry, nor does she rage. She just says, their time is not there, so why should I get,
I still feel she should have, if I was to rewrite it, she should have made some attempt.
We have to rewrite the new
Ramayana and say, stop getting influenced by the societal pressure and the paradigm.
This is the new Ram and Sita, that we are the myth makers. And this is the new myth. That old paradigm of Ram and Sita, where she was suppressed and abducted, is over. We are the myth makers. The new myth, the new versions have to come up, where Sita is standing beside him, not that golden statue beside him, but the real Sita beside him, who keeps listening to her conscience and wakes it up in
Some
the male.
writers have said that in some way our mythology has endorsed the suppression of women, that Lakshman drew a line and said, you stay behind this line, if you don't, if you step beyond this line, and this is what girls are taught, that you always stay behind the line, don't cross it.
But the Lakshman Rekha, if she hadn't crossed it, she would have never found out who she was. Then she would have remained also in that patriarchal suppressed form, stuck. She has to cross the Lakshman Rekha in order to follow her own path. Women will always remain behind those patriarchal Lakshman Rekhas otherwise. There would have been no Ramayana had she not crossed. She had to cross.
For everyone's spiritual journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Each one of us have to cross where we know where there is a right or a wrong and what you have to do at that moment. She had to cross that.
Do you think any of the women in power, that we see so many of them, we have Jayalalitha, and I'd say Mayawati is still in power in some sense, that she's the head of a political party. There's Mamata Banerjee, there's Sonia Gandhi, there's a whole host of them in across the country. But as reading through your excerpts, what I see in them is that there's more male in them than the feminine. They're not transforming any of the patriarchal parts. In fact, they are embracing the male part and becoming them.
But the angry male,
yes,
in order to their male function mirrors the angry male. It's not the transforming part which can turn the Rams around.
So we don't have great role models.
We don't have a role model. So we have to make the change in order to transform feminine in man. But we first have to get in touch with our own feminine nature. And for that we need to cross the Lakshman Rekha, by the way.
Thank you very much, Rashna.
Most welcome, Madhu.